Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game episode. Today we're in our long-running series, the Unported Playlist, where I take a look at some of my favorite unported arcade games of all time. And we're right in the middle of spooky season. That means we're going to be playing Dark Escape 4 from Namco, released in 2012. This is basically a House of the Dead clone. It's your classic horror light gun shooting game, and while it is still a fun time, it is definitely a B-tier experience, not just from a movie perspective, from a gameplay perspective as well. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But if you've never seen a cabinet for Dark Escape 4D, it was massive. This thing had 3D, it had different spatial sound effects, and other enhancements that would make it really seem like a quote-unquote 4D experience. Obviously, we're not getting that today. I'm not putting this video up in 3D because nobody has the glasses. But this is your quintessential horror light gun shooting game. It basically plays like a combination between House of the Dead and House of the Dead Overkill on the Wii. This is a ton of fun. It's your classic horror shooting game, but it is not without its flaws, and I will talk about those as we get further into the gameplay. This is basically running on PlayStation 3 class hardware for the arcades, and it's really surprising Namco never brought this home, considering a lot of the other games from arcades that were light gun based, like Time Crisis, did come to PlayStation 3 with Move support. Now right off the top, it is a horror game, but I do not understand why they insist on putting these circles over pretty much every character. It really is horror in the worst way possible, because I don't want my gore and other effects covered up by these gigantic neon colored greens and yellows and reds. You'll see right there, that truck just came screeching right towards us, and if we did have the full 3D on, that would look like it was coming closer to the screen. Obviously, PlayStation 3 had 3D support, and 3D TVs were huge back in this era, and definitely a technology that did not hit, and I'm not surprised. Nobody really wants that headache, figuratively and literally. With 3D glasses, give me an absolute splitting migraine, and this spinning saw blade right here would have been part of that 3D effect. But luckily, via the test menu, we can play this as a complete 2D experience. Now, you will see here as we get into the next stage, there is this monster in the doorway. We get this slow push in with the camera, and then whatever that is, I'm sure you could guess what they were trying to go for, comes out and extends. It jumps right in your face. The thing about Dark Escape 4D is it has moments where it 100% shines and really sells that horror vibe. My issue with the game, even though I do find it very fun, is that it is inconsistent. The game slows itself down a ton. It really makes you fight through the same area a long time shooting zombies. And honestly, while the shooting mechanics are satisfying, some of the enemies just seem to be bullet sponges in the way that they want to take credits off of you. Some of these enemies here you have to unload 15, 20, 25 bullets into just to knock back, and sometimes it feels like no matter how many bullets you put into a particular enemy, it is going to cause damage like it wants credits. This is definitely a game that is going to become fundamentally easier if you play with two players, because in a lot of instances as a one-player experience, you're going to have things coming at you from the left and right hand side of the screen at the same time, and try as I might, I cannot shoot in two different directions at once. Sure, I could set this up as a two-player, one-player control experience, but I went with the one-player just to show you what it would be like if you were just playing on one set of credits. The game definitely does have some story, and it's not terrible whatsoever. It kind of feels like it's taking the concept of the Saw movies and running with them. Also has a little bit of Until Dawn vibes going on as well. But I will say that they lean way too heavily into the classic horror movie tropes, kind of that dark scientist trying to pervert reality and trying to make nature do its own thing. It's definitely well-trod territory and a bit worn at this point in time, but again, like I said, for every negative I can think about it, it has a definite positive. Going down this hallway with a flashlight on a Magnum and only seeing the screen when you point over it illuminated, that 100% works, and it definitely dials up the sensation of tension. And you will see that there is a heart rate meter at the top left-hand corner of the screen. That is more as an arcade cabinet feature, and sadly, I haven't seen a Dark Escape 4D arcade cabinet for a very long time, probably like 7 or 8 years. So if you do know where there is one, leave me a comment down below, I would be curious. And if it's close, maybe I'll go play it again. But what this game does better than a lot of other games I have seen is it actually has some really good environmental soundtrack that sounds more like a soundscape. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, and I'll come back and talk more about the history of the game and what I think about it. But enjoy.
You can turn the light off now.
It's an interesting soundtrack, as in some spots it really more is that soundscape. As we move on further into the game, I will give them credit for the character design that are not zombies. The zombies kind of feel like they're from a generic asset pack. I've seen them 100 times before, and Dark Escape 4D is doing nothing to make them any bit better. But all of the other monsters, the bosses, things such as that, really do have a unique character design. Now, of course, Namco is going to be well known for doing something like Time Crisis or even Dead Storm Pirates. Dark Escape 4D was their attempt at doing horror, and it wasn't really a genre they played around with much, and it definitely shows here. This is not on the level of something like the House of the Dead from Sega. I do like this design here. It's basically a human being that's been turned into almost like a crocodile. There is a lot of different hybridization between humans and animals and plants in this game, and it really does work from that design perspective. But again, as you're running around with the boss, it kind of feels like sometimes the game wants to play itself. It gives you these little cutaways and shows you what you need to do, but I wish it would just keep us in the shooting action. I don't know how we even got up to the second floor. It seems like we just teleported there. It's one of those things. This is a really fun game that could have been an incredible game. It just seems to kind of trip over itself every once in a while. I don't want to take 45 seconds just to go up there to shoot one handle, to come back down here and continue the fight. Just keep the action going, keep my aiming reticle on the boss, and let me unload those clips on him. Although I do appreciate the ending of this fight where this gigantic light array comes down and crushes both of them as they are jumping into the screen. This game's definitely trying to give you spectacle, and so much of it still works even without those 3D glasses, but sometimes it just does seem to slow itself down. But I mentioned earlier in the video, this game basically dealing in well-trodden tropes of the horror genre, and now of course we have hillbilly zombies in the woods. It's one of those things. The designers of this game basically seem to sit down with a piece of paper and say, what are all the things that are popular in horror? Let's do those now. Kind of a cabin in the woods sort of vibe here. I do like the TV cutaways, and the story and voice acting are actually quite good in this game, a lot better than you would expect. And this kind of haunted cabin here, with all the zombies trying to come through the windows and the doors, definitely works from a gameplay perspective. And if you had 3D, those shards of glass would have been seeming like they came straight at your eye. And here is the thing, if you do play this via emulation and you do have 3D glasses, you can get that same effect. It is not easy to set up, and it's 100% not for me whatsoever. It does give me that splitting headache. But if you want to see something like that work, you can 100% do it. And you'll see here, again, just have to kind of unload onto the enemies. And that's the weird thing. Sometimes a zombie takes 2 to 3 hits to put down. Sometimes they take like 8 to 10, even if you're hitting them in the head at the same time. It is very uneven in the gameplay department. You're never quite sure why something happened or didn't happen. And when you're playing a game, that is not exactly the best quality to have. But let's kind of change gears and focus on the positives of Dark Escape 4D, because it may seem like I don't like the game, and that's not true. I actually do quite enjoy it. I just wish it lived a little bit more up to its potential. But I love these arms coming through the wall here. Kind of feels like the introduction to Day of the Dead from George Romero. If you've never seen that movie with the arms coming through the calendar wall, definitely check it out because it is the spooky season. And of course, it's not a zombie game without a zombie wielding an axe a la House of the Dead. It is a hard game though. Obviously we're not putting in real quarters, we're on free play, but if you're actually in arcades, this game is definitely going to take you for your money, but you're still going to have fun. It's still a huge experience, and honestly it is one that's made better by that gigantic arcade cabinet, because you really can't pivot and translate those special features to a PC. But obviously if there's a haunted mansion, there's got to be a scientific lab underneath, and this is where the soundtrack gets a little bit more intense. Go ahead and listen for like 35 seconds, and I'll be right back.
We can go this way. It won't open.
For what you could hear of the soundtrack there, that is the sound effects, and the zombie screens definitely come over the music a lot, but they're really good sound effects and they are really good zombie screens, so you definitely want to have that. And no clue why there's cash in this barn right here. Does never get explained on the story, but it is fun to see those bills flying up into the sky. And again, like I said, the actual zombie character design feels a little bit stale, but I've got to give it up to the boss encounters. This is basically a Venus flytrap mixed with a gigantic, like 11-foot tall zombie that can leap up high into the air and has Scissor Man scissors from Clock Tower on his arms. I don't know if it's inspired by Clock Tower, that's the vibe I get, but leave me a comment down below and tell me if it reminds you of anything else. And of course, at some point in time, we just find a random rocket launcher on the ground, and that is what we're going to use to put down the boss here. The boss fights in this game are great. Outside of the first one where it does like to pause and show you some environmental scenery, when you're fighting a boss in this game, it is from start to finish action-packed shooting content and goodness, and I do love that. And once we get into the final area, we get these disgusting mantis shrimp spider combinations. Do not know who thought that up, but it is absolutely nightmare fuel, and if you're not dreaming about it tonight, the game has not been doing its job. And of course, because we do see spider webs, you know what is coming. My least favorite feature in any horror game, one that designers always lean on, because it is quite effective, because people like me absolutely hate them. That in fact is going to be gigantic spiders. I don't know why they use them. I wish they wouldn't. Game developers out there, give me a little bit of a break. Just pick another scary bug. I hate spiders. I don't like shooting at them, and that's just a personal thing. That's mostly just a joke. I really do not like spiders, but leave me down below a comment with your phobia, because that spider just took me out to a continue. And of course, it's a horror game. Spiders are really easy. They're right up there with zombies as far as Halloween horror goes. But again, as we move further into the game, it does have a good story arc, and it definitely gets a lot more difficult in those final stages. And some of these designs here start getting a little bit more effective with zombies. We're going to start getting doctor zombies and hazmat zombies, different things you're going to see very shortly. And again, if you were playing this in 3D and you could keep your headache down to a minimum, seeing all these enemies jump at you would definitely be even more effective. But I just love this classic trope. I know this game is using all of horror and basically combining it together, but the scientific lab where they're growing monsters is always a good look. Definitely has some of those Resident Evil vibes going on there, and I love all the models. You just kind of get a chance to look at them without them trying to rip your throat out while you're shooting. And because this is the last stage in the game and the action is the most intense, it is nice to get a little bit of a breather and admire some of the art. But of course, it is a horror game, and it's definitely going to use a lot of jump scares. Dark Escape 4D has more jump scares than any other light gun shooting game I've ever played, but they are effective, and of course it is a video game, so jump scares aren't the worst thing in the world. Now, I know throughout the entire commentary, the Dark Escape 4D experience has been a mixed bag for me. When this game shines, it shines bright and it is absolutely amazing. The problem is it is never even. It starts out with the first stage, which isn't relatively that exciting, and stage 2 gets better, and stage 3 gets great. So overall, it is definitely still in that B tier category, but Dark Escape 4D is still a ton of fun, and if you're looking for a great horror game to play this Halloween, you could do a lot worse than this one. Short of that, we're done. Here's the final boss, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.